everybody, Dan Shinder here on Drum Talk TV. How are you? I hope you're doing well. Let us know where you're watching from. I'm broadcasting from Globe, Arizona, 100 miles east of Phoenix, up in the mountains where it's a little bit cooler. It's only 100 today. And my guest today is Pat Petrillo, who's coming to us from his home in New Jersey. Pat, how are you?
What's up, Dan? How are you, man? It's not 100 degrees here, that's for sure. But it can get that way. But great to see you. Thanks for having me on, man. I greatly appreciate it. I really love what you do for the drumming community, and I love your site, your Facebook posts, your interviews, and it's fantastic. And I'm just honored to be here. Thank you.
I appreciate it. And, you know, it was real fun to have you part of our broadcast team 2 Winter NAMM shows ago. For those of you who don't know, Pat has a deep background in drum corps. I do not. So, and the Winter NAMM show of 2019, I wanted to get somebody that could do those interviews with the drum brands that make drum corps gear. And Pat was my first choice. He was available, so he did a whole bunch of interviews.
That seems like another life ago when I did drum corps, but it was a big part of my growing up for sure.
Yeah, and certainly gave you some great tools for your toolbox that you applied to your drum kit. And now, 40 years later, whatever it's been, you've recorded. Yeah, it's metric, so it's not as much as it seems.
There you go. I'm going to keep that. I'll use that. I like that one.
Yeah, you realized a really cool dream, and I think if as I have in the promo post, and even this one, when we ask people what would be your dream location to record at, Abbey Road is going to be #1 for a huge amount of people. And you made that happen with the New York City Rhythm Big Band, your own project. I'm going to roll a sample clip in just a moment, but can you give everybody first a brief synopsis, then I'll play part of one of the songs, and then we'll really dig into it. What's the brief synopsis of New York City Rhythm?
Thank you. The NYC Big Rhythm Band is a project that I always wanted to do, and it started about 3 years ago, and I wanted to have my own group. And I wanted to play arrangements of music that I love and unique arrangements and stuff that's out there as well, but make it a groove rhythm band. We do some, like traditional big band stuff, but this is not your father's big band. This is, we do great arrangements of, it started with some great arrangements of Beatles tunes, my favorites that lend themselves, to a horn band. It's more of a horn band, really. Yeah. It's 6 brass and then 4 rhythm sections, so there's 10 in the band altogether. And then we do some Earth, Wind & Fire, great arrangements, mostly done by Nick Finzer, who is my trombone player, very popular trombone player in New York City, and Dennis Argel, another great trombone player, did a few arrangements. And so we just do arrangements of stuff that I like, and we start playing, and we gig around New York City. We play at the Cutting Room, and we're about ready to do that again and embark on a mini tour until this whole thing kind of kicked in place. So, but that's the genesis of the NYC Big Rhythm Band, and I want to thank people. Actually, I wanted to do a record, and I said, why not go to the to Mecca and do it there, or Mecca.
Yeah.
And so, but I did a Kickstarter, and everybody that contributed and made it happen, thank you so much. So
that is so awesome. I want to give everybody who has not seen one of the promos a little taste. This is Lady Madonna like you've never heard it before. And when we come back, we'll talk about this particular recording. Check this out, folks.
Explain what we're listening to, brother.
Put me on the spot like that.
Let's do it.
All right, I don't want to spoil the whole thing.
That's all right.
I just love
Cool.
this. So I'll kind of kick it off with some questions. And folks, if you have questions, I'll be checking a monitor over here if you see me looking over there. Pat, I think I remember two things from when you were going through the mixing process and we had some time to like talk about the project. I think of the two things I remember that stand out the most is you told me that your drums were set up right where Ringo's were set up.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's the piano from that same song from the original Beatles recording, right?
Yeah, that's the reason why I wanted to go there and do this, because I wanted to make it, not just to be there, obviously, and set up, you know, a 66 Ludwig, you know, classic maple kit in the corner where Ringo was. That was obviously part of it. The other part was to use those two keyboards that were used on most of these records, because we do Lady Madonna, we do Savoy Truffle wasn't cut at Abbey Road, but we do Martha My Dear, Magical Mystery Tour. We do a lot that use those two keyboards. One is the blonde keyboard that you see there, that's called the Challen, and the other one is a darker wood that has more of a ragtime feel to it. Some people call that the Lady Madonna piano, but it's not. My engineers, as we A-B both of the pianos, we said, you know what, the Challen, the blonde piano, is the one that they really used on Lady Madonna. And so I wanted to use those keyboards, man, and that's the ambiance of the whole thing that makes the record. So when you hear it, it's like, wow, that's the real one.
Yeah, and isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy that they're still there? Like, to me, that's fascinating.
Oh yeah, they're in great shape. Oh yeah, people use them all the time, you know, and they're still there. And Paul just used them for some of his stuff as well. And I mean, whenever he goes in it, they're great. And the drums they were just rented from John Henry's in there. But you know, like Ludwig was like, well, we'll get you, you know, a nice new kit. It's like, no, I don't want a new kit. I want old wood. You know, I want that sound. I want, you know, we didn't quite get a black oyster, but we found a blue oyster, so it was close enough. But the drums sounded great, and I got actually found before Ludwig actually past year reissued the Jazz Festival. I found a couple out there, so I rented a couple of Jazz Festival snares, 5.5 by 14, and you know. I actually even used a couple of the same mics that Ringo used, the D20s. They still had D19 and D20 mics. If you see any pictures of Ringo with the mics hanging in the front, I used that mic. That was one of my overheads.
It's amazing that stuff still works.
It works. They only have two original D20 and D19 and D20s left. You only have two, but we use them. So, but we had some newer mics set up too. We captured a lot of the room sound. So we really, you know, I wanted to hear, you know, I also did some older Beatles and some newer. So some of the older stuff, I wanted more of an open sound, so we used more room mics, like on Tell Me Why, which is one of my favorite Beatles tracks, real upbeat shuffle. You can hear a little more ambiance in the room. You can hear more room mics. But then when we did stuff like Savoy Truffle, I put tea towels on the drums, and we used the same slapback that they used to get that reverb on the drums. Yeah. It's a tape loop, so the engineers there were great. They knew exactly what to do. They actually had that loop machine, so we used that to get that reverb on the drums. So I wanted to go, you know, listen, this is like an homage, but it's more of a reimagining of how this is, you know. So I wanted to stick to his parts, but you'll hear, like in Lady Madonna, it's a little bit funkier version, but there's two different drum tracks on the original. The drums are panned really hard to one side on the original, so I always felt like the drums should have been more up in the mix, you know. So you know, and I kind of carved out my own little thing around that. But I think one of the things is people don't know much about. I mean, the people know my education and, you know, teaching and doing, you know, rudiments and stuff and drum corps and then, you know, Broadway stuff that I've done and performances and, you know, whatever it is, Patti LaBelle or Gloria Gaynor. But they don't know that when I was 4 or 5 years old, I was Ringo. I grew up listening to the Beatles, you know.
Let's dig into that a little more after I show another clip. I want to show a Magical Mystery Tour. And if you're just joining us, we're here with Pat, Not Faking It, Petrillo, and
you,
the story
brother.
of him recording at Abbey Road Studios with his NYC Rhythm Big Band. And I love that you added the word rhythm in there because it really
Absolutely.
does. It's very telling.
It's more than a big band. It's the Big Rhythm Band.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
A lot of different rhythms.
Right. Check this tune out, folks. And what's cool about this video is that it's sort of like a mini documentary in the visual storytelling during the process.
It's me getting to the studio for the first time, actually.
Yeah.
So
check this out, folks. It's great.
Thank you, man.
Let's go inside and make a record.
So cool. There's a little bit longer of the teaser.
Man. So you hear that? We use the exact same effects that they used, and that's the exact keyboard they used. That's on the record. So, they dialed that in and used that exact tape loopy, reverby thing on that. So that's all printed from the studio. So thanks for playing that, man. It's fun, right?
Yeah, totally fun. And you kind of hinted, but go a little deeper on why the Beatles. When you were 4, 5, you were watching the Beatles. How much were they a part of your musical sensibility?
I have to say, like I have older brothers, and my oldest brother was in a little band, and of course, Beatles were huge back then. 66, 67, they were in their prime, and I was like 4 years old. But so I listened to his records a lot, and that's how I started playing. And I tag along and sit behind the drums sometimes and just have fun. So that's all I listened to. That was my musical world. For first 3, 4, 5 years of me doing any kind of music was that. I mean, I wasn't even barely in school yet. So all I did was play those records every day, and it kind of just seeped into my soul, really. And not just the drum parts, but the lyrics, the bass lines, I learned to sing listening to the Beatles. I learned to harmonize listening to the Beatles. I learned song form and song structure listening to the Beatles. So that was my world, really, musically, and it's not a bad thing to grow up listening to, you know.
Right.
So it was great, you know, and for me. And then when I was about 9 or 10, I bought my first James Brown 8-track. So I literally went from Ringo to Jabbo and Clyde in like an afternoon, you know. So it was like that. So, you know, and then later on learning that Ringo listened to, you know, Earl Palmer and all those great, you know, drummers from all those other records. So it was just always a part of my DNA, man, and just playing drums and playing along to music. And then I didn't get into education and learning drums until I was really in drum corps. I was about 12, 11, something like that. And that's when I started drum corps and really learning my rudiments. Up to then, man, I was just having fun playing like everybody else, you know, playing to music and records. So that's why, you know, the Beatles, you know.
Yeah,
when you grow up looking at those album covers and you're like, you know, wow, you know, that's great, you know.
Yeah.
So
it's exactly the process I went through when I started. I think, if I remember right, I think we're the same age. Were you born around 1963?
61.
Okay,
yeah,
so
61.
you're just a little older.
Yeah.
So we're the same age. And when I was started playing like 6½-ish, I was so into Zeppelin already. You know, it was like 69.
Cool.
I had older cousins like you, I had older brothers. And as each album came out, I really got into it, and I started playing on drum set on my 7th birthday. God, I can't believe that was 50 years ago.
Wow,
I started
crazy.
playing, you know, their stuff, but
Right.
it was the same thing, just sort of immersing into the album covers, reading. I learned how records were made by reading the credits, basically, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
What I liked that's similar about being so into both bands is, and especially the Beatles, if you listen to their catalog in chronological order, there is no greater example of an artist's singularly and collectively their evolution. So if you listen to the early records and then go from like Rubber Soul all the way to Let It Be, the White Album, it's like a whole metaphor. It's like a
exponentially
seed to a plant with this giant flower.
Absolutely. And Ringo got more creative and was allowed to do more things, I feel. And I, you know, and you can still hear him, you know, and people, you know, it upsets me a lot when people say he's not a great drummer. So it really upsets me, drives me nuts. But I mean, when you listen to his parts, I mean, all right, he plays for the song. Yes. But what he does and how he texturizes the beat and how he's got a slight lilt to most of the grooves and their shuffles. The shuffles that they did, I mean, in terms of, you know, like, for example, the one Ringo sang on What Goes On in Your Mind, I mean, that's fast, you know, and his technique and his relaxed feel and his fluidity was fantastic. So I learned from the best drummers. You know, the records were it, and that's how I learned. So this whole thing for me, was a. When I started the band, I said, if we're going to do these tunes, that's the goal. So I put a Kickstarter together, and I said, well, let's see what happens. And I knew how much it was going to take per day to be there and everything. So we actually were there for 2 full days, Dan. 2 full days. Wow. And I thank everybody who contributed to the Kickstarter and made it happen. And hopefully we may do it again and do another set of tunes. You never know. But that's my evolution in terms of the Beatles and why, you know, the Beatles. But the record is on Amazon. You can pick it up a CD, which has a lot of cool liner notes and some other cool pictures on here. And of course, digital download on Amazon. But I did not put it for free on those other platforms. I only have 3 songs, I think, on Spotify. The record label is Palmetto Records, and they wanted to, we release the whole tune. I said, no, we're not doing that. I'm not doing it for free. We worked too hard for this. We'll put, you know, 3 songs out there. If people like it, please purchase it and help, you know, help the whole thing come along, you know. So, and also we're on about 90 radio stations around the country. Powderfinger Promotions is the record label's radio promotion company, and it's It's on a lot of like college and jazz radio stations all around the country. One in particular pops in my head, Kuvo, KUVO in Denver, plays literally a track a day. So it's really getting a lot of airplay, and it's out there. So it's in the days of making records, you're never going to sell records. It's selling, and it's doing pretty good. I thank you guys, and if you're interested, please check it out.
That's awesome. I'm old school in that I've never downloaded music ever. I'm one of these guys. What?
Yeah, I hear you, man. Me too.
I got
a whole stack myself.
Yeah, I'm still upset that I'm stuck with this, and I have the tiny packaging and not a big album.
And not an album. And records are coming back. Records are coming back, but we did not do vinyl because it is still pricey. Yeah. And the label's like, listen, it's X amount. Even if you get it made overseas, it's pricey to make vinyl. So, I'm not a major artist that needs to put out vinyl. So, but the CD is cool. There's a lot of cool pictures and liner notes. I'm also going to be releasing the play-alongs.
Oh wow, that's outstanding.
So I have them. We've kind of tweaked the mixes a little bit, but I don't know what platform and how we're going to do it and how we're going to purchase it. But just follow me on Instagram and Facebook. You'll find me, and I'll let you guys know.
Yeah, we'll do this again when they're available. And I personally would love to get them and play those tunes on my show when I broadcast from the studio. I would love that.
Awesome. Yeah, it's fun.
To do that.
The parts are I use them as Ringo's parts there as inspiration, and then I just kind of crafted my own little versions of them. Like we did Got to Get You Into My Life. Yeah. And we did a mashup of the original, of course, the Beatles version, and the Earth, Wind and Fire version.
Yeah, awesome.
Towards the end. Yeah. And the groove that I did for Got to Get You Into My Life, because there's really not much in terms of drums on there. I took the beat to, it was just in my head here. From
Smoke on the Water.
No, Getting Better All the Time.
Oh yeah.
So I took that little black, and I put that into Got to Get You Into My Life. So I did a couple of things like that, and just I didn't use. I just used the same kit. I want to thank Paul Francis, if you're watching, from Zildjian and Sarah and everybody from Zildjian who Paul Kraft, he got some Avidus. He said, this is Ringo's, pretty much what he would use, Avidus. And I had a 20 and an 18. The 20 had 3 rivets in it.
Yeah, I saw that in the video. Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you about that.
So, and he had the big one on his left and the 18 on his right. Yeah. So the 20 is here and the 18 is on the other side. So, they really helped me capture the essence of what his sound is. But of course, we're all imitators of the master. Nobody's duplicating.
A few questions. Let's see. Which direction do I want to go? We'll circle back to Ringo, because I do want to talk about Ringo, but let's go here first. Now that you've done this, other than doing live shows once you're able to do that, other than that, sometimes they say, Pat, I heard this years ago, and it really stuck with me, that sometimes the hardest act to follow is your own. Do you have any ideas for your next recording project? Like, do you already have it vividly in your mind? Or really, can you
thinking of a couple things? Out? Yeah. Well, the obvious thing is to do another one and go back and do some more arrangements, because I do have a couple more arrangements of Beatles tunes. Okay. But then I was also thinking of potentially perhaps doing something out in California. I would like to do go over Sunset Sound and capture some like maybe some Beach Boys arrangements for this, because that would be cool, because those harmonies are really thick. Yeah. So maybe go over to Sunset and Sunset Sound and do that. I also thought about maybe going to Muscle Shoals and doing something, and then maybe in New Orleans, because I have so many influences, you know.
Yeah.
But those are a couple things, you know. I think once we get back to performing, but I think the label is happy with how things are going, and I think we can, you know, probably go ahead and do another one. But I really, you know, I'm thinking if we have enough tracks, we may go back. If we do another Kickstarter, we may go back and do it again. What I offered on the Kickstarter, and a couple people took advantage of it, is at a certain level, I think the highest level of donation was you get to come into the studio with me. So there was a few, there was three people that took advantage of that, and they got their way out there. And I put them up for a night or two, I believe, but they had to get out there, but they were allowed to come in and sit in, and they got a chance to actually record.
Yeah.
So I sat them down behind the drums, and they got a chance to record it.
That's really cool.
Yeah, they got a chance to record a track of one of my tunes. So
that's great. What a great experience. I'm really happy for you that.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, that you got to do this, because I know what it's like. I'm fortunate enough to know what it's like to think of something and have it materialize and do it. And for something on this scale is just awesome.
It was huge. And you know, listen, again, I've been, as you know, in the industry a long time as an artist, educator, and what have you. But I think I have a pretty decent reputation, I hope, you know, and I have a lot of people who support what I do, and either be purchasing the books, the videos, DVDs, and whatever it may be. But so they believed in, if I'm going to put myself out there to do it, that they're going to support me. So, and a lot of people stepped up and helped to support it, and hopefully I delivered for everybody. And I think that's the great thing about the community is especially the past 10, 15 years, is the togetherness of the social media bonding. And I think that, you know, the Kickstarter stuff and things to help people get projects off the ground. And you know, I just try to do right by people who follow my career in whatever way I can, you know, whether it's teaching or designing products.
I'd like you to talk about the educational aspect of what you do, because I love when you post videos of youngsters that you're working with and the breakthroughs that they make. Why don't you talk a little bit about the age groups you work with and the levels and your method of teaching?
First of all, there's certain things that everybody does when they study with me privately or online, and we work on hand technique. We work on a relaxed hand approach. I have a rudiment combination thing that I teach, and memorizing rudiments, and I have a tab system that I developed for people to learn how to put rudiments together in combinations, as opposed to reading the rudiments. You know, you have to memorize them so that you can actually use them, you know.
Right.
So we do that. We do some reading, because I have a DVD, Learn to Read Rhythms Better, so we work on reading. But then we get right to like essential, like bass drum grooves to develop your foot, and then essential ghost note grooves. And then once that establishment is there, I start getting into subgenres of groove. We'll get into groove history. Right. We'll get into New Orleans and talk about, you know, second line, Mardi Gras Indian beats, talk about all the James Brown stuff, all the Motown, all the Memphis. So we start to get into the pockets of the groove. Yeah. And then, of course, we'll work on, you know, some styles, some Afro-Cuban, Brazilian, some jazz, but it is based in a foundational approach. And I have all ages, all levels. I have a youngster who's been with me since about age 6, 7, and I just had a lesson with him today. Vedant, he's killing, man. We just did Sorceress by what do you call it? Chick Corea, Romantic Warrior.
Oh, one of my favorites. That's one of my favorite albums ever.
It's amazing.
My first exposure to fusion. I just love that album.
So somebody's at that level, we're going to dive into doing that kind of stuff. So, but I'm teaching online. I've been teaching online since this, you know, the whole thing started, and building a studio next to my house. Before I was at a studio that I was renting, but since they closed, I had to, you know, come up with something. So building a studio here next to my house, it's almost done, and I'll be moving in there, and I know I haven't been putting out videos recently because we're still trying to get this thing set up. So that's sort of my approach. And I do have, you know, local plus online. I had a guy from Liverpool this morning, believe it or not, who's a student of mine. So it's like, you know, giving back to the community of Liverpool. That guy gave us the Beatles, you know what I mean? So that's awesome. Pretty cool. Yeah, so between the teaching and the performance and the playing, and then of course the products that I've designed over the years. I've designed the P4 practice pad that Drumeo sells. They're distributing it, doing it very well. And then I designed the K Custom Organic Ride for Zildjian.
Yeah.
And those guys are really great with listening to artists about products and about sounds that are in their head. And this cymbal was, I don't know if anybody's I've heard the Organic Ride, but Paul Francis, we went back and forth for 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
On this. And, I wanted a 21, but I wanted something that could crash as well as be articulate enough, not too washy with a great bell. Not too much to ask, right?
Where's the alchemist?
The perfect cymbal. I just want the perfect ride cymbal. So, he just kept going back and forth with prototypes, and he came up with this cymbal it literally is great for anything. It's not too much wash, just enough stick definition. You can crash it. It's sort of like a 21 crash ride, if you can believe it, and has a great bell. And I just call it the Organic Ride. The name sort of came to me. It's very sort of like the Earth Ride, but it's nowhere near as dry. But it's similar to that. It's got a really cool patina to it.
Nice.
Patina.
Yeah.
So that, and the practice pad is doing great. I have another product that I'm working on. I can't tell you about it.
Okay.
But it's in the works.
Okay,
it's
cool.
in the works.
You have to update me when you can.
You know what I like to do? I like to reinvent or build a better mousetrap.
Cool.
You know what? And ultimately, the drumming community will tell you if it's a better mousetrap or not, right?
That's true.
If they like it. So like with the P4, with the practice pad, it's like, well, the world doesn't need another basic practice pad, but this is different because it's got different levels and different rubbers to it.
Right.
So just try to, change lanes and keep doing what I do and try to stay positive and moving forward and focus on education and playing. I miss playing a lot now. I mean, this past 3 months or so, I haven't played hardly at all, except for, I can't set up my drums. I have a practice pad kit that I use. I work on my chops and my hands, but I know that when the studio is done and I'm back set up again, and it's going to be, you can't keep me out of there. It's going to be like a kid in a candy store again. And I think, sometimes, and I explain this to people, I think that a time away from the thing not just makes you appreciate it more, but it refreshes you. It just hits the reset button.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes you get locked into certain things over and over and over.
Yep.
You just get away from it. When you come back, you got a different perspective.
Yeah. Oh, I agree 1,000%. It's just taking a look real quick at some comments. What was I going to ask you? Oh, okay. So, circling back to Ringo, what is the freaking deal with the same people who see someone like Tony Royster Jr. or Neil Peart or someone like that, and they say, oh, it's all unnecessary. The kit's too big. There's too many chops. Where's the groove? And those same people are bagging on Ringo, saying him or Charlie Watts were like the luckiest guys in the world to be in the right place. Why are some people just never happy, and why does Ringo take so much shit? Excuse me, folks, but I got to put it down.
No, he does. He does take a lot. And, I think part of it depends who the shit thrower is, I guess.
That's true.
Those people they're just not happy with themselves anyway, so they're just going to say what they're going to say. They're frustrated that they're not them, maybe.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be, listen, I'm not about kumbaya all the time, but I mean, there's got to be some sort of decorum. If you don't got nothing nice to say, just shut up. Don't say anything.
It should at least be about respect.
It'd be about respect. And would the Beatles still be successful? Of course they would if Ringo wasn't in the band, but they wouldn't sound the same. I mean, their songs would still be the songs, but the songs sound the way they do because of his feel.
Yeah.
And because of his unique parts. And again, I challenge anybody to go back to that song, Tell Me Why, and try to do those triplets between the snare and the tom with double-handed at that tempo. I challenge you to do that. I mean, he had his choppy moments, but I mean, you could say the same thing about Earl Palmer.
Yeah.
Okay? Earl Palmer was about making great records with great feel. There's a reason why people wanted to have Earl Palmer on their records.
Right.
Because of the way he sang. You never heard Earl Palmer super fills or what have you. It was all about his feel and his, listen to him on Slippin' and Slidin' from Little Richard. That in between feel, that's what they want. Same thing with Ringo. I mean, his feel is what makes it. And people who say he didn't have great feel, they don't understand what feel is. They don't understand, they truly don't understand what it's like to play in the middle like that.
Yeah.
Like half straight, half swung. And you can hear that. Those records would not sound the way they do if it wasn't for him.
I agree.
And that's just the way it is.
I think it's also that some people are not impressed. What's the way to put it? Some people are not impressed unless they're hearing something they can't do. And it's not about the fact that you can't do what Ringo does, but he's the one that was there and did the placement of it in that
Absolutely.
piece of music. That's a whole different thing. Nick Mason, Jim Keltner, Hal Blaine, Ringo Starr, Charlie Watts, none of them were known for huge, fills and crazy madness like that. And those who are, if we go way back before Buddy Rich, if we look at like Papa Joe Jones, Sonny Payne, Rufus Speedy Jones, those guys were amazing. They're all at different ends, each at different ends of the spectrum. And it's not a matter of whether or not someone's doing something he can't do. It's the fact that they're doing it in the right situation.
In the right situation and context is everything.
Right.
And I call them rhythmic fills. They're not choppy fills. Ringo played rhythmic over the bar line fills.
Yeah.
Quirky because he maybe started to fill with the left hand because coming around a 1 and 2 or whatever, he would start with the left hand. And he would start fills with the left hand and he would drag with his right hand. So, but there were more rhythmic fills. Listen to Rain, which is his favorite track that he ever recorded.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, it's his favorite track that he recorded was Rain. And listen, and if you also listen to, there's no hi-hat in a lot of grooves that Ringo did.
Yeah.
Early on he was washing the hi-hat, but then after that it was just this way, and just dropping the hi-hat in here and there. Here's a little thing about Ringo. Everybody knows the beat to In My Life. But Ringo didn't create that beat.
Where did it come from?
That beat was first heard on the song called Anna, Go to Him, by, what was his name? And the Beatles covered that song too. Now I'm going to have to look it up. But he got that groove from that record.
Really?
Now, yes, but the thing is, Anna, go to him. So that's the original song, and he got that from. Well, I'm going to find the artist here in a second.
While you look for that, I want to mention
what is it?
something.
I can't find it.
I want to mention that along those lines, I was going to say that there's a lot of stuff that one of the greatest, most loved rock drummers, John Bonham, there's a lot of stuff John Bonham did that was not complicated, but it was the way he played it. And I look over and Daniel M., let's see if I can pronounce your name right, Daniel. It's, Klotfelter says When the Levee Breaks is a great example of that.
Yes.
Kashmir, 10 Years Gone.
Absolutely.
Even the Immigrant Song. There's nothing complicated about that, but it's the right thing with the right feel in the right context for the right piece of music. It's the same thing.
Yes, and so he was not the first. I can't find the guy's name right now. But that's when the Beatles covered Anna. Ringo played the same beat that was on that original recording. And he used it on a couple other songs as well.
And that's context. So it's taking something that worked and making it work somewhere else.
And working, and so we're all learning from each other.
Yeah.
Everybody learns from everybody. Ringo learned from the greatest drummers, and listened to their recordings and their records that he learned to play. And that's, I'm kind of doing the same thing. We're all doing the same thing.
Right.
But, everybody can learn a few Ringo tunes. And if I put 5 guys right at Abbey Road in my chair and say, here's the track, play it as close to Ringo as you can, nobody will sound that way.
Right.
Doc D, it's just the way our physical thing is, the way we're made up. It's not just the notes, it's physically your makeup, your touch on the sticks, your grip, the kind of sticks you use, how high you sit, how low you sit.
Yeah.
All of those
big
things.
matrix of elements that makes it what it is.
It is. It's exactly it. So it was just an amazing, experience to be there. I have to say it. When I first got there, Jonathan Mover was there, and we did an interview for Drumhead magazine, and we're taking pictures and stuff. And it took me the first hour and a half or so just to settle down.
Yeah.
Just to be like, okay, now.
That
relax.
reminds me. I was going to ask you, when you were at Abbey Road, was there a moment where you either did this or wanted to do it so bad where you put your ear to the wall to see what was still reverberating from when they recorded there?
Man, I have to say, I touched almost every ounce, every area that I could. I walked around and, I had my Beatle boots on, basically, but, just hearing your feet on the floor, it has a certain, and I told this to my wife too, it has a certain smell. Mm-hmm. In a good way. I've been in a lot of studios, and when the studio has just been freshly whatever cleaned and you smell cleaner or cigarettes or whatever. This was none of that. This had a certain, maybe it's the wood.
So I was going to say, maybe the wood.
Could be the sweetness, if you know what I mean, that was always floating around, that seeped into the wood. It definitely, the room also has, it's a big room. It's not the biggest at Abbey Road, but it's a big room. But it's a very focused sound. When you play, the sound goes, but it stays right where you are, sort of, So, the room sound is there, but it's a very focused sound. I've been in big rooms, and when you play, it's like, wow, it's all over the place. This room they have those things on the wall, so it's like the room is tuned, man, and it does have, I did sit down and play, of course, in my life and a few other things and just said, yeah, man, this is it. This is what he played. This is where he sat. This is what he did, Cool. And is it weird? Some people think, yeah, man, you're strange. It's like, okay, maybe. But, nonetheless, there's only a handful of drummers that you can say influence and change the world. And he did.
Yeah.
He changed the drumming world. His feel people often imitate, Charlie Watts is another, so those guys are just always going to be, Earl Palmer, those guys are always going to be in that pantheon of drummers. Yeah. And, you're going to get, like you said, you're going to have guys that are like, man, no chops, no whatever. But chops is all relative. Well, what is chops? A lot of notes?
Right. And,
what is chops?
Good point, because playing for the song is also relative. Brian Tichy once said, when we were talking, he said, Neil Peart played for the song in La Villa Strangiato. And I said Carl Palmer played for the song in Tarkus and Carnival Night.
Sure.
Playing for the
and
song.
Carnival Night, sure. And it called for certain things. Yeah. If it called for it, you could do it. And that's the thing. So, I've had this discussion with a bunch of people in different interviews. So I feel as if nobody has, we can all criticize here and there. It's a free world and stuff, but, nobody has the, I don't have the nerve to, but I don't think drummers have the nerve to go back on somebody like that who has such a catalog and diss them in any way.
I just see nothing productive about it. To diss any drummer on any level, I just don't understand. Or any musician,
And they can say, "Hey, I don't like the Beatles." Well, that's fine.
Yeah, if it's not your thing, that doesn't mean it sucks.
That's fine.
Yeah, right. People need to really change their language, and just because they don't like something, you can't say it sucks. It just means you don't like it.
That's right. Because it might suck to you, but not to billions of other people around the world. So I mean, so I guess for me, I grew up a song drummer. Other drummers, and this is where you can hear the difference. And I really think it's in how you grow up in your environment that you grew up in. Like your first concert you were telling me about was Led Zeppelin, and then the music that you were exposed to and you were listening to. So in my neighborhood where I grew up in a multicultural, ethnic neighborhood. So I was listening to the Beatles. I was listening to soul and R&B. I was listening to funk. I brought them in Funkadelic records, next to my Beatles records, next to my Sly Stone records, and next to my Rufus and Shaka Khan records. So, and then I got to later on, as things got more, I started hearing more things. I started getting into Yes, and they're next to the Yes records. So I grew up listening to that stuff. So you're a product of what you listen to. So if you're a drummer out there, and you're a young drummer and you haven't listened to anything pre-2000, you're doing yourself a disservice. So you really have to get in and listen to stuff and be inspired by that. So if a drummer our age grew up playing jazz first or shuffles first and really was just a swing player, and they end up being an excellent jazz drummer, but they never really grew up listening to groove music as much or playing groove music as much. That is sort of obvious in their playing. And the reason why that is because that's not in their DNA. It's like a rock drummer who never listened to jazz. It works the same way.
Right. And I think a good method of discovery to that is listen to who your heroes grew up on, and you might be surprised. I interviewed Nico McBrain the other day of Iron Maiden, and it was the Beatles that did it for him. He saw the Beatles and told me the story of as a little kid tagged along with his sister, I think it was 10 or 12, and saw the Beatles in London.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, and you wouldn't, most people probably wouldn't think a metal drummer like
Absolutely.
that.
And the same way with Bonham. It's the same way with Bonham. I mean, Bonham grew up, he idolized James Brown's drummers.
And Max Roach.
And Max Roach. So that, my point is, and I say this to people a lot, you can't come from somewhere unless you've been there.
Yeah.
And when I say come from somewhere, not physically, but musically, you can't expect to sit down and be a good groove player if you don't listen to much groove music. Right. You're not going to really be able to swing. We could teach anybody how to go ting, 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 technically, but you're not going to swing unless you listen to that music and it gets inside of you for a minute. It doesn't have to be years and years, but
you have to immerse to some degree.
You got to immerse, and that's part of my teaching. It's part of, like, and I was teaching a lot at Drummers Collective. I taught a lot of the U.S. roots classes and contemporary funk as well as R&B and soul classes and stuff. And the look on guys' faces and girls' faces when they hear this music, it's like, huh? Yeah. I never knew that existed, and it's like that's what you have to be into,
Yeah, and you mentioned, I don't know if you know this, but you mentioned Sly, and you grew up on that. My wife's maiden name is Graham.
Oh, that's great, Larry Graham.
That's her cousin.
No way.
Yeah, Larry's her cousin.
Oh, man, Graham Central Station was the bomb.
Yeah,
that was Larry's group.
Noted bass player to slap.
He was the first bass player to slap. Yeah. And I had a discussion with somebody about, I was talking to David Garibaldi. We were doing a Zoom thing. We were just chatting and seeing how he's doing and stuff. And I said, dude, not only San Francisco in terms of music and the great bands like Sly and Tower Power and whatever, the bass players, two of the most influential bass players in history, Rocco and Larry Graham. I mean, you can't get two more different bass players coming from that same. What's in the water that was going on back then?
It's like the water in New York makes the best pizza, and the water in the San Francisco area makes the best bass players.
The bass players. It's true. So I don't know. I guess I'm just a product of what I grew up listening to, and I'm always learning. I'm listening to new stuff. You know, like try to listen to new bands and newer bands, and I love. Like, in other words, like my record charted on jamband.com. It was in the top 20. And I'm seeing Lettuce, I'm seeing Wolfpack, and I'm saying, oh man, my record's right up there with these bands I really dig. You know, we've been doing it for a while, you know? So I'm listening to the new stuff, and I'm just glad people have accepted it and really dig the record. And once again, if you don't know what it is, go on Amazon and check it out. You're going to like it.
Yeah, in fact, Pat, I'm sorry that I didn't ask you this before, but email me the link and we'll edit it and put it in the post of this interview and the promo.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Hang on the line. And I really appreciate you coming on and talking about your magical mystery tour, which is not as much of a mystery to us now. Thanks for sharing
Absolutely.
that. I can't wait to hear about the next chapter, and I'm going to get the CD for sure. And let us know when the play-along tracks are available, because I personally want to jam to that stuff. It's awesome.
Will do. Man, thanks, and thanks to everybody out there, and thanks for what you do for the industry and so many people. And I see you running around in NAMM like crazy, talking to people and interviewing them, and it's such a great thing for so many drummers and musicians who never get to see what NAMM is about, and you just bring it to them, and that's fantastic, man. Just keep it up, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
My pleasure always, Pat. You're always welcome. It's an open door. And folks, thank you so much for joining Pat Petrillo and myself here on a Drum Talk TV interview. And thanks for following the silliness. Much more to come. In fact, if you're watching this live or Friday the 26th or even first part of the day, 27th, Achilles Priester joins me tomorrow. Probably Brazil's darling metal player of all time.
Amazing.
And we got lots of great stuff planned for next month as well.
And don't forget, Ringo's birthday, July 8th. Everybody say peace and love, peace and love.
80. That's right.
I'm going to be 80 years old.
Yep.
Love you, Ringo, man.
Absolutely.
Thanks for everything.
Thank you, everybody, so much. And we will see you again soon. I'll be doing my almost daily vlog tomorrow sometime. What time? Real quick. Oh, not tomorrow. The 28th, Sunday, 1:30. Join me. I got all kinds of bags of tricks of stuff I'm going to play to and talk about. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Ooh, wrong button. There we go.